Who, truly, were the first people to create civilization? Ask most people, and they might say the Egyptians with their towering pyramids, or perhaps the Chinese dynasties with their ancient dynastic rule. Yet history points us in another direction, toward a forgotten people who lived in the marshy plains of southern Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago. They were the Sumerians, and they may have been the very first to transform scattered villages into organized, complex urban life. It is difficult to exaggerate their importance. The Sumerians invented writing, turning symbols pressed into clay into the world's first permanent record. They created city-states with temples, palaces, and bustling marketplaces. They organized laws, built canals to tame rivers, studied the heavens, and even told epic stories that still survive today. These were not just the first steps toward civilization, they were leaps, and yet their story is not well known. Unlike the grandeur of the pyramids or the legends of Rome, Sumer exists in fragments. Broken tablets, ruined ziggurats, buried tombs. But within those fragments lies the foundation of almost everything we consider essential to civilization. Government, trade, education, religion, and law. So who were they? Where did they come from? And how did they rise so quickly? The answers are not simple, and in fact, many remain mysteries that puzzle archaeologists to this day. But to understand the world they built, we must first look at the land they called home, a place ancient scribes described as the land between the rivers. To understand the Sumerians, we must journey to their homeland, Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. This region stretched between the Tigris and Euphrates, in what is today southern Iraq and parts of Syria and Kuwait. At first glance, it might not look like the birthplace of civilization. The land was flat, windswept, and hot, with little stone or wood for building. Rain was scarce, and summers could be brutally dry. Yet hidden in these challenges was an opportunity. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers regularly overflowed their banks, depositing layers of rich silt across the plains. This fertile soil, though unpredictable, gave the Sumerians the chance to grow more food than they could ever produce in the hills and deserts surrounding them. But there was a catch. The floods could be destructive, arriving at the wrong time and washing away crops. To survive, the people of Mesopotamia had to learn to control the water, and so they dug canals, built dikes, and designed irrigation systems to tame the rivers. This was no small feat. It required cooperation on a massive scale. Whole communities had to come together, not only to build, but also to manage and maintain these waterworks year after year. In doing so, the Sumerians discovered something revolutionary. When humans organize, they can shape the natural world. Out of this cooperation came government, administration, and the beginnings of urban life. By around 3500 BCE, small farming villages had transformed into larger settlements and then into cities. The most famous of these was Uruk, which may have been the world's first true city, home to tens of thousands of people. Here rose monumental temples, storerooms packed with grain, and wide streets crowded with merchants, priests, and laborers. The city was not just a cluster of houses, it was a symbol of human achievement, of order carved out of chaos. The landscape shaped everything about the Sumerians, their economy, their religion, even their worldview. To them, the rivers were both life-givers and destroyers, blessings and curses. This duality can still be seen in their myths, where gods were often unpredictable, capable of both great generosity and terrible wrath. It was within this environment, this delicate balance between survival and disaster, that the Sumerians laid the foundations of civilization. But what exactly did they create that was so new, so remarkable, that we still feel its echoes today? What set the Sumerians apart from all who came before them? The answer lies in their astonishing list of firsts, innovations so transformative that they echo through history even today. For the Sumerians were not merely farmers or builders, they were creators of the very structures that make civilization possible. Perhaps their greatest achievement was writing. Around 3200 BCE, they developed cuneiform, a system of wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets. At first, it was a practical tool for accounting, recording grain deliveries, livestock, and trade agreements. But over time, it expanded to include laws, prayers, literature, and even the world's first known epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Writing gave them the ability to preserve memory beyond the limits of oral tradition, to pass down knowledge, and to govern complex societies. Without it, history as we know it would scarcely exist. Then there were their cities. The Sumerians pioneered the city-state, a political system where each city was an independent kingdom, with its own ruler, its own gods, and its own laws. Cities like Lagash, Eridu, and especially Uruk became centers of innovation and culture. Rising above them all were the ziggurats, massive step temples that reached toward the heavens. These monumental structures were not only places of worship, but also symbols of power, visible reminders of the bond between gods and humans. Their technology was equally groundbreaking. They are credited with inventing the wheel, first used for pottery, and later for carts that carried goods across Mesopotamia. They advanced mathematics, creating a base 60 number system still echoed in our 60 seconds and 60 minutes. They studied the skies, charting the movements of stars and planets, laying early foundations for astronomy. They established schools where young scribes trained for years to master the difficult art of writing, making education itself a structured institution. In law, too, they were pioneers. Before Hammurabi's famous code, the Sumerians already had legal systems, recording contracts, property rights, and punishments for wrongdoing. Order, both cosmic and human, was central to their worldview, and their laws reflected the need to keep balance in society, just as irrigation balanced the unpredictable floods. Each of these achievements might seem ordinary to us today, but in the ancient world, they were nothing short of revolutionary. Writing, law, cities, science, trade, all emerged in Sumer, shaping the path of every civilization that followed. And yet, behind these monumental creations were real people. Farmers who tilled the fields, scribes who etched tablets, priests who offered sacrifices, children who learned their first words in a language unlike any other. What was daily life like in the world's first cities? To answer that, we must step into the streets of Sumer itself. If we could step into a Sumerian city around 2500 BCE, what would we see? The streets would be narrow, winding between mud brick houses, their walls plastered with clay to withstand the harsh sun. Children might be playing outside, their laughter mingling with the sounds of merchants haggling in the marketplace. Farmers would be arriving with baskets of barley, dates, and onions, while craftsmen displayed their goods, fine jewelry, pottery, and textiles, ready to be traded for silver or grain. Life in Sumer was organized around the rhythms of agriculture. The majority of people were farmers, tending fields of barley and wheat, irrigated by canals that stretched from the mighty rivers. But in the cities, specialization flourished. There were scribes, priests, soldiers, carpenters, and merchants, each contributing to the life of the community. At the top of society stood the Ensi, the city's ruler, often working closely with high priests. Together, they managed not only the political affairs of the city, but also the sacred rituals that bound humans to the gods. Religion was everywhere. The Sumerians believed the gods controlled all aspects of life, the floods, the harvest, even the fate of individuals. Each city had its patron deity, worshipped in towering ziggurats that dominated the skyline. These temples were not only places of prayer, but also economic hubs, where offerings were collected and redistributed, and where priests acted as both spiritual leaders and administrators. For the Sumerians, there was no separation between the divine and the earthly. To live in Sumer was to live in constant negotiation with the gods. Education was also central to their culture, at least for the elite. Young boys destined to become scribes would spend years in schools, memorizing symbols, copying texts, and practicing the difficult art of writing on clay tablets. These scribal schools were strict, with punishments for mistakes, but they ensured that knowledge and administration could be passed from one generation to the next. Family life was structured and practical. Marriage contracts were recorded on clay, and dowries were carefully noted. Women could own property and run businesses, though most worked in the home or fields. Festivals and feasts brought moments of joy, with music, dance and storytelling filling the evenings. And in quiet moments, people surely wondered about their place in the cosmos, just as we do today. Yet for all their advances, the Sumerians also lived with uncertainty. The rivers could destroy as easily as they gave life. Disease, war, and famine were constant threats, and death loomed large in their imagination, reflected in myths that often portrayed the afterlife as a shadowy, joyless realm. Perhaps it was this awareness of fragility that drove them to build so much, to write, to pray, to legislate, to organize. But despite all we know about their daily routines, many questions remain unanswered. Where did their mysterious language come from? A tongue unlike any other on Earth. How did they develop such advanced knowledge so quickly? And what secrets still lie buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia? For all that archaeology has uncovered about the Sumerians, their cities, their laws, their myths, many aspects of their civilization remain deeply mysterious. In fact, the closer we look, the more questions seem to emerge. One of the greatest enigmas is their language. Sumerian is the earliest known written language in the world, but it has no relatives. Unlike English, which belongs to the Indo-European family, or Arabic, which is Semitic, Sumerian stands completely alone. Linguists call it a language isolate. This means it is not related to any other language we know, living or dead. Where did it come from? Was it a remnant of an even older, forgotten people? Or did the Sumerians themselves invent it? To this day, no one knows. Another puzzle lies in their sudden leap forward. By around 3500 BCE, they had already built cities, developed writing, created irrigation systems, and organized complex governments. Such rapid advancement seems unusual compared to other regions, where progress was slower and more gradual. How did the Sumerians accomplish so much so quickly? Some scholars suggest that necessity drove innovation. The harsh environment forced them to cooperate and innovate or face extinction. Others wonder if there are missing pieces to the story, cultures or influences we have yet to uncover. Then there is their knowledge. The Sumerians had a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy. They divided the circle into 360 degrees, created a calendar, and tracked celestial movements with surprising precision. Were these simply the results of careful observation, or did they inherit knowledge from an earlier, unknown tradition? Ancient texts describe the gods teaching humans the arts of civilization. Myths, of course, but myths often contain echoes of truth. Even their myths themselves raise questions. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of a great flood that nearly destroyed humanity, a story strikingly similar to the biblical tale of Noah. Was this a coincidence, or evidence of a shared ancient memory of a catastrophic flood in Mesopotamia's past? Archaeologists have indeed found evidence of widespread flooding in the region, though whether it matches the legends is still debated. And finally, there is the greatest mystery of all, the origin of the Sumerians themselves. Their sudden appearance in southern Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE is still unexplained. Did they migrate from another region, bringing with them a fully formed culture? Or did they emerge locally, building upon older Neolithic traditions in ways we do not yet understand? Without clear evidence, their beginnings remain shrouded in the mists of time. These unanswered questions have fueled centuries of speculation. Scholars continue to dig, translate, and theorize, piecing together fragments of clay tablets and ruins. Yet not all explanations are agreed upon, and some interpretations go far beyond the limits of traditional scholarship. Archaeology has shed remarkable light on the world of the Sumerians, even if many mysteries remain unsolved. Since the mid-19th century, explorers and scholars have uncovered ruined cities buried beneath the sands of Iraq, Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, each one revealing new insights into how the first civilization functioned. One of the most important discoveries has been cuneiform itself. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets have been unearthed, containing everything from trade receipts to legal codes, myths, hymns, and even jokes. These texts allow us to reconstruct the fabric of Sumerian society in ways no other ancient culture of the same age permits. We can read their laws, track their taxes, and listen to their prayers. It is almost as if the Sumerians, knowing they were the first, wanted to ensure they would never be forgotten. Archaeologists have also revealed the social structure behind Sumerian life. Irrigation required enormous organization, which in turn produced administrators, overseers, and record keepers. In many ways, bureaucracy, the paperwork and administration that runs governments to this day, was born in Sumer. Archaeologists studying temple complexes have found storerooms filled with grain and records of its distribution, showing how religion, politics, and economics were tightly intertwined. Science has confirmed that much of Sumer's progress was driven by environmental necessity. The unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates forced them to coordinate irrigation projects, while the lack of natural resources encouraged trade. Excavations at sites like Ur have revealed evidence of long-distance trade networks. Shells from the Persian Gulf, timber from Lebanon, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Sumer was not an isolated world. It was connected, exchanging goods and ideas across continents. Even the great myths, once dismissed as pure imagination, have found echoes in archaeology. The story of a great flood, for example, was long thought to be a mere legend, but geological studies have uncovered evidence of significant floods in the Mesopotamian plain during the 3rd millennium BCE. While not as universal as the stories suggest, these floods may well have left such an impact that they lived on in Sumerian memory, and later in biblical tradition. What scholars emphasize, however, is that the Sumerians were not mysterious aliens or lost superhumans. They were ordinary people who, through ingenuity and necessity, created extraordinary solutions. Their writing, their cities, their science, these were natural developments born from human creativity, shaped by environment and circumstance. Yet, despite the clarity archaeology provides, not everyone is satisfied with these explanations. For some, the mysteries of Sumer seem too vast, too sudden, too advanced to be explained by science alone. And so, more controversial theories have emerged, ideas that stretch far beyond the bounds of traditional scholarship. For some, the story of the Sumerians is simply too remarkable to be explained by human ingenuity alone. How could an isolated people, over 5,000 years ago, suddenly create writing, astronomy, law, and monumental cities, seemingly out of nowhere? Questions like these have fueled some of the most controversial theories in modern history, ideas that place the Sumerians at the center of ancient mysteries far beyond archaeology. The most famous of these theories involves the Anunnaki. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were powerful gods who descended from the heavens to shape the fate of humanity. According to the myths, they taught humans agriculture, crafts, and knowledge, and sometimes punished them when they strayed. To the Sumerians, these were divine beings, unpredictable and mighty. But in the 20th century, writers like Zecharia Sitchin reinterpreted these myths in radical ways. Sitchin argued that the Anunnaki were not gods at all, but extraterrestrials, beings from another planet, whom the Sumerians misinterpreted as deities. In his books, he claimed that these aliens genetically engineered humans, teaching them civilization so they could serve as workers. He pointed to Sumerian depictions of winged figures and celestial symbols as evidence, interpreting them as encounters with advanced visitors from the stars. This idea, sometimes called the ancient astronaut theory, captured the imagination of millions. Documentaries, books, and television shows popularized the notion that the Sumerians held secret knowledge passed down from spacefaring gods. Even today, the theory persists, drawing those who see in Sumer's sudden rise something beyond ordinary explanation. But mainstream scholars are far more cautious. They remind us that myths are symbolic, not literal records of events. The Anunnaki, they argue, were reflections of natural forces, political power, and human imagination, not aliens. Archaeologists find no evidence of advanced technology beyond what the Sumerians themselves created. What seems sudden progress is, in fact, the product of centuries of gradual development in agriculture and settlement. And yet, the popularity of these theories reveals something important. The Sumerians inspire wonder. Their achievements feel so monumental, their origins so mysterious, that people long to believe there must be more to the story. Whether through myth, legend, or speculation, the Sumerians continue to live in the human imagination as a civilization touched by something extraordinary. But even without invoking aliens or lost knowledge, their impact is undeniable. The legacy of the Sumerians did not vanish when their cities crumbled. Instead, it spread across Mesopotamia and beyond, shaping the civilizations that followed, and ultimately shaping us. Though the Sumerians eventually faded from history, their influence never disappeared. When their city-states weakened, they were absorbed by neighboring peoples, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians, who adopted and expanded upon Sumerian innovations. Their language may have vanished by around 2000 BCE, but their ideas lived on, forming the very foundations of civilization. Take writing, for example. Cuneiform, invented by the Sumerians, was adapted by countless cultures across Mesopotamia for nearly 3,000 years. Through it, myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh and legal codes like Hammurabi's were preserved. The concept of codified laws, rules written down and made public, still shapes our understanding of justice today. The Sumerian city-state also left a lasting mark. Though later empires built vast territories, the idea of the city as the heart of political, religious, and cultural life began in Sumer. Every modern city, with its government, markets, and sacred spaces, owes something to those first experiments in Ur and Uruk. Their mathematical system, based on 60, continues to echo in the way we tell time and measure circles. Their observations of the skies laid the groundwork for astronomy, while their irrigation methods paved the way for agriculture across empires. Even their myths, with gods who could be generous or cruel, still resonate in the stories of later cultures, from the Hebrews to the Greeks. But beyond their tangible contributions, the Sumerians left something deeper, a reminder of the human capacity for imagination. They were the first to ask big questions about the universe, about gods, about life and death. They were the first to take nature's chaos and impose order through law, religion, and architecture. In many ways, they were the first to dream on a grand scale. It is no wonder, then, that the Sumerians continue to fascinate us today. Their ruins may be silent, but in their silence, we hear the echoes of our own beginnings. They remind us that civilization did not arise by accident. It was built carefully and deliberately by people no different from us in their hopes, fears, and desire for meaning. The truth about who the Sumerians were and why they achieved so much may never be fully revealed. But one thing is certain. When we look back at them, we are looking at ourselves, at the very roots of what it means to be human, and the journey of discovery does not end here. In the next episode, we will turn from the cradle of Mesopotamia to another legendary mystery, the search for the golden city of El Dorado, a tale that blends myth, exploration, and the eternal human hunger for riches and wonder. So, if you enjoyed this exploration of the first civilization, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because history still holds many secrets waiting to be uncovered.